Hey there, this is R A Manard, Mitravav from Monks of the Way, and this is Weekly Truth Talk Part 2. Is there a self or not is the title, and I'm not actually going to be debating whether there is or there is not a self. So if you're listening for that, you'd be a little let down. It's from the perspective of Buddha's teachings, and he was not a fan of that, to put it lightly. There's a passage where Buddha advises all the monks to avoid getting involved in questions like, what am I? Do I exist? Do I not exist? Because they lead to answers like, I have a self and I have no self, both of which are a thicket of views, a writhing of views, a contortion of views that get in the way of awakening. And the reference for that would be Majjhima Nikaya 2. And that's Majjhima, Nikaya, Nikaya, number 2. The Buddha warned his followers not to enter into these debates pretty clearly. Sutta Nipata 4.8, that would be Nipata 4.8 as a reference, partly because once the sponsor of the debate sets the question, the debaters can't follow Buddha's policy of putting useless questions aside. You're stuck into it. You're there for the duration. That's how debate used to work. There's something called the Katha Fado, and attributed to King Asaka. It contains the earliest version of the answer no to popular literary works, the Buddha Charita and Milinda Panna. They both are from around the 1st century CE, and they place this no at the center of Buddha's message. So a lot later, people made some texts where Buddha decides there is no self, but that didn't exist till then. Even later texts, and if I can pronounce this right, Abhidharma Mokosha, Abhidharma Mokasha, Bhashya. It'd be spelled Abhidarma Kosha and then Bhshya, in case you wanted to look it up. Provides analytical answers to the questions of whether there is a self, saying that there's no personal self, but that everybody has a dharma self composed of 5 aggregates: material form, feelings, perceptions, mental fabrications, and consciousness. So a lot later than Buddha, some people get together and write that Buddha says there's no self. And then later than that, some people get together and say not only is there no self, here are the parts of the self. And let's get into that. And they really start making some things different in the teachings, let's say. Now, at present, we have our own analytical answers to the question, such as lost my information here. Anyway, they in those latest writings there, they have a teaching where they say there's no separate self, but we do have a cosmic self. And that particular teaching, Buddha singled out for special ridicule. And that reference is MN 22. Now, there is no self is the granddaddy of fake Buddhist quotes. I mean, a lot of people believe Buddha said that. A lot. And it survived so long because of its resemblance to the teaching of anatta, which means not self, which is one of the Buddha's tools for putting an end to clinging. Even though he never either affirmed or denied the existence of a self, he did talk of the process by which the mind creates many senses of self, what he called I-making or my-making, as it pursues its desires. In other words, he focused on the karma of selfing because clinging lies at the heart of suffering. And because there's clinging in each sense of self, he advised using the perception of not self as a strategy to dismantle that clinging, if that makes sense. Now, whenever you see yourself identifying with anything stressful or inconsistent, you remind yourself that it's not self, not worth clinging to, not worth calling yourself. And the reference for that is SN 22.59. There's references to these things, many sutta. I'm not saying in one sutta, one translation says this or says that. I'm saying this is a consistent message, and here's how it goes. Now, this practice that Buddha makes, it's supposed to help you let go of it. When you do this thoroughly enough, it can lead to awakening. And in this way, not self-teaching is an answer, not to the question of whether there's a self, but to the question that Buddha said lies at the heart of discernment. What, when I do it, will lead to my long-term welfare and happiness? And he says that in MN 135. Now, you find true happiness by letting go of these things. Some ways of selfing the Buddha and his disciples found are useful along the path as you develop a sense of self that's heedful and responsible, confident that you can manage the practice, develop a sense of self that's heedful and responsible in your practice, and that being yourself. And that's okay to associate. Actually useful. That's Anguttara Nikaya 4.159. Anguttara Nikaya Nikaya. And I keep giving you these references and spelling them out because you may want to refer back to this and play this again for yourself and jot down where these particular references are and look them up. And you shouldn't just believe me, of course. Well, Buddha says this and Buddha believed that. You know, that'd be ridiculous to just believe me. So you really should look into this. But as a subject of debate, I'm just going to continue with the references here. Now, while you're on the path, you apply the perception of not self to anything that would lead you astray. Only at the end, then, do you apply the perception to the path itself. Hope that makes sense. As for the goal, it's possible to develop a sense of clinging around the experience of the deathless, or not clinging. So the Buddha advises that you regard even the deathless as not self. That's reference AN 9.36. But when there's no more clinging, you have no need for perceptions of either self or not self. That should be pretty evident. You see, at no point is answering the question whether is or isn't a self. It just can't be important. You've found the goal at that point, so it just wouldn't matter. It's a problem that solves itself, let's say. A belief that there's no self can actually get in the way of awakening, according to Buddha. And let's see where he says that. Yeah, there it is. The contemplation of not self itself can lead to the experience of nothingness. That's MN 106. And if your purpose is participating in dissolving the self, perhaps from wanting to escape from responsibilities of having a self, you can easily interpret the experience of nothingness as proof that, what you think is true, that it's a sign that you somehow reached the end of the path, that that there's no self, so there's nothing to know, so there's no sense in making any practice. There's no sense in trying. which would be pretty harmful, as you can probably guess. And the Buddha warned that subtle clinging can persist in the experience for sure. If you think you've reached awakening, you won't look for clinging usually. You think you've reached the end of the road, like I said. But if you learn to keep looking for clinging, even in the experience of nothingness, then you'll find you have a chance of finding what you're looking for there. And only when you actually find something like that can you let it go. So, once again, there's still effort, there's still mind, there's still knowledge, there's still skill involved, no matter what. There's no shortcut along the path to enlightenment. And a lot of people want to sell you one, but there isn't one. It's you living the life, doing the thing, being you. Being you like nobody else can because they're not you. It's important to remember which questions the not self teaching was meant to answer and which ones it wasn't. Um, Getting clear on this point can mean the difference between a false awakening and a real thing for some people. Um, these concepts about not self that I've been talking to you about, there's a guy, a monk named Thanissaro Bhikkhu, and he's an American Theravada Buddhist. He's of the order currently at the Meta Forest Monastery in San Diego County. And he talks a lot about this stuff. And I mention him because the way I've said it, I've pretty much plagiarized what he's talking about when he talks about this not self mistake people make. And it's easy to make the mistake because many monks who really believe what they're doing are for the concept of there is no self. And it can be pretty destructive no matter what you decide. Anyway, I want to keep these short, these videos, and I laid a lot on you there. If there's any questions about this, because I am pretty versed in the not self versus no self talk and texts and things. But you can ask a question regarding Buddhism or perception from Buddhist point of view, whatever you'd like as a question. So while you're thinking about what you might like to ask, if you would like to ask a question, you can type it in there. I'll go ahead and let you know that these talks go every week, and they are on the Facebook page that you're probably viewing it from. And each one then gets put on YouTube, so there's a channel of these, and they also get edited so that there's space and there's irrelevant stuff that makes it a little too long, maybe like me talking at this very moment. And they get edited out and makes it a little shorter, makes it a little cleaner. And sometimes when I talk, I go off on a tangent a little, maybe, or I'm a little silent here or there. Not perfect at this, certainly. Not really trying to be. But in any case, there are some different versions of these same videos, so you might want to look there too. Anyway, I don't see any questions, so I do want to once again thank everybody for having a listen. I hope that truth will remove delusion in your lives the way light removes darkness. Thank you.